My soul floated light as a dandelion seed, looking down at the girl collapsed on the cold linoleum floor. Mom, I'm sorry. I really wasn't lying this time. I just couldn't hold on anymore. Despite knowing I suffered from severe chronic anemia, my mother had insisted I participate in the university's campus-wide blood drive. She didn't want the optics of her own daughter sitting out while she, the dean of students, presided over the event. She called it leading by example. At the 100 milliliter mark, the world began to tilt. My vision went grainy like an old television losing its signal. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trying to escape a cage. I reached out, my fingers trembling as I tried to steady the tube, trying to tell the nurse I needed to stop. But she just clamped her hand over my wrist, pinning me down. Stacy, the phlebotomist, shot me a look of pure unadulterated annoyance. She looked at my ghost's white face and scoffed. Only 100 mils and you're already trying to tap out. Everyone else is doing the full 400. Don't be a drama queen. She leaned in closer, her voice a sharp whisper. This is a charity drive, honey. Trying to fake a faint to get out of it is just selfish. Honestly, people like you should be forced to give double just for the attitude. My mother stood a few feet away, her arms crossed, her eyes like chips of flint. She didn't offer a hand or a kind word. She just looked disappointed. Zoe, is this how I raised you? She asked, her voice echoing in the sterile room. Everyone else is doing their part. You don't get to be the exception just because you're mine. Then came the words that felt like a death sentence. You stay in that chair until you hit 400, Zoe. Even if it kills you, you are finishing what you started. I gasped for air, but my lungs felt like they were filled with cotton. When the third bag began to fill, the light finally went out. My body felt heavy like lead, and I felt myself slip away. As I hit the floor, a suffocating darkness grabbed me and then nothing. My physical body slumped over the donation table. The sudden movement, jerking the needle. Blood began to backflow into the tube. A dark, rhythmic pulse. Stacy shoved my shoulder, her patience clearly gone. She ripped the needle out with a sharp, careless tug. I'm trying to work here. Can you stop moving for 5 seconds? Now I have to restic you. When I didn't answer, she let out a huff of disgust. She grabbed my arm and drove the needle back in hard. Oops, missed the vein. You won't mind, right? She did it again and again. She dug the needle in with a sickening deliberateness until my inner elbow was a mess of bruised, purple skin. But I couldn't feel the sting anymore? Fine. Play the silent treatment. Stacy muttered, swapping the bags without looking up. Zero school spirit. Everyone else is doing their part. And you're here acting like it's a Greek tragedy. It's just blood. Zoe, you're so entitled. She glanced toward my mother. I don't know how Dean Mercer ended up with such a spineless, selfish daughter. The students in line behind me started to whisper. I heard she's actually sick. Like really anemic, one girl murmured. What if she's actually hurt? Please, another boy replied, rolling his eyes. The nurse said she's faking. And look at Dean Mercer. She's totally calm. If something was actually wrong, her own mom wouldn't just be standing there, right? I hovered above them, desperate, looking at my mother. Her brow was furrowed. Her lips thinned into a line of pure resentment. Zoe, get up this instant. You're making a scene in front of the entire department. I didn't move. I couldn't. Stacy paused, her hand resting on my limp arm. She looked up at my mother and sighed. Dean, she's really committed to this act. Should I even bother continuing? She only hit the 100 mark. Everyone else did the full draw, but she's just being difficult. Stacy leaned in as if sharing a secret. Actually, she just threatened me. She told me that because she's the dean's daughter, I should just credit her for a full bag and let her go. Or she'd have me fired. Maybe we should just let her go before she causes more trouble. I tried to scream to tell the truth, but I had no voice. My mother's face darkened. A flash of pure rage crossed her features. She walked over and kicked me hard right in the small of my back, because my body was already a dead weight. The force sent me sliding off the chair and onto the floor. You are a disgrace, she hissed. When did you become so manipulative? I honestly don't know who you are anymore. I lay there, a discarded doll on the tiles. My mother was shaking, her heels clicking, as she stepped closer and pressed the toe of her shoe down on my wrist. Is this fun for you, Zoe? Making me look like a fool in front of my colleagues? Do you think being my daughter means you get to hold everyone hostage? With your tantrums? She leaned down, her voice a cold, jagged blade. The biggest mistake I ever made was fighting so hard to bring you into this world. A few students behind us gasped. Stacy covered her mouth, but her eyes were dancing with a cruel sort of glee. My heart, the ghost of it, ached. I remembered the stories. My mother had gone through 3 rounds of IVF to have me. I'd seen the faint, faded marks on her skin from the hundreds of injections. I knew she had bled for me, cried for me, suffered for me, and I remembered being a child. I was born premature. The anemia a lingering shadow from my first breath. My mother used to stay up all night when I was sick. Her notebooks filled with meal plans and massage techniques to keep me healthy. She used to be my protector. But everything changed when she became dean. On my first day of college, she sat me down for a professional talk. We have to maintain boundaries, she had said. No special treatment. No favoritism. To maintain boundaries. She gave my merit scholarship to the runner-up. If you take it, people will say I rigged it for you, she explained. You have to understand, Zoe. To maintain boundaries. She gave my spot in the prestigious state internship to a student from a troubled background. I have eyes on me, Zoe. I have to be seen as fair. I understood. I swallowed the unfairness every single time. I did it for her. But this time, to prove her fairness, she had forced me into this room. Because you're my daughter. You should be the first one in line. If you don't do it, how can I ask anyone else? And now she was telling me she regretted my existence. I looked down at my body. My arms were a map of bruises and needle holes. I wasn't faking. I was gone. Stacy grabbed my arm, pretending to pull me up, but her grip was loose and mocking. Come on, Zoe. Just 200 more meals and we're done. She slipped. She stumbled back, letting out a small shriek as she fell to the floor. The blood bag she was holding flew out of her hand, hitting the floor and bursting. Deep crimson blood splattered everywhere. My body was jerked upward for a second, before slamming back down into the puddle of my own blood. My white shirt soaked it up instantly. Stacy bit her lip, her eyes suddenly brimming with fake tears. Zoe, why would you do that? I was just trying to help you up and you pushed me. She looked at my mother, her voice trembling. She just threw the blood. All that work wasted. Dean Mercer, I'm so sorry. I know how much you care about this drive. Stacy started to sob. The picture of a victimized worker. I'm so jealous of her. You know, she has a mother like you. She gets to go to this great school. And I'm just a nurse working double shifts. And she treats me like garbage. I stood there invisible, watching the absurdity. A dead girl can't push anyone, Stacy. But my mother believed her. She walked over and pulled Stacy into a hug, rubbing her back. It's okay. Don't cry. I won't let her bully you anymore. I felt a coldness that had nothing to do with death. My mother looked at my body on the floor with utter loathing. Since she's so determined to play dead to get out of this, I'm not lifting a finger to help her. She looked at Stacy. Take the blood she wasted out of her other arm. Draw it all. I want to see exactly how long she can keep up this little performance. The students in line started chiming in. She's totally faking. I can't believe Dean Mercer has to deal with this. So entitled. She thinks she's royalty just because of her mom. She's literally wasting everyone's time. Just pull the blood and move on. Then the university president walked into the room, alerted by the commotion. He saw me on the floor surrounded by red, and his face went pale. Dean Mercer, what happened? Do we need an ambulance? My mother turned a weary, practiced sigh escaping her lips. Mr. President, please excuse my daughter. She's having a bit of a tantrum, because she didn't want to donate the blood on the floor. She threw it to get back at me. She looked back at me with a hard, unforgiving glare. Don't worry about her. The more attention we give her, the worse she gets. She needs to learn that she can't always get her way. The hum of the fluorescent lights in the gymnasium was the only sound that didn't distort. To my disembodied self, everything else sounded like it was underwater, sluggish, warped, and heavy. Stacy, my mother said, her voice carrying that familiar practice clip she used during academic senate meetings. Get her up. We have 3 more departments scheduled before the afternoon session. This is getting ridiculous. Stacy, still sitting on the floor with her knees tucked to her chest, sniffled loudly. She looked up at the president, then at my mother, her eyes wide with a carefully manufactured terror. I tried, Dean Mercer. I really did. But she just snapped. She grabbed the bag right out of my hand and squeezed it. Look at my scrubs. Look at the floor. I've never had a student attack me like this. She didn't attack you. A quiet voice muttered from the back of the queue. It was the same girl who had pointed out my anemia earlier. Her name was Maya, a sophomore pre-med student who lived 2 doors down from me in the dorms. She was shaking. She told you she couldn't breathe. Silence. My mother snapped, not even looking at Maya. The student body does not dictate the terms of this drive. Zoe, I am counting to 3. If you do not stand up and apologize to Stacy, I will have campus security escort you to the disciplinary board myself. I don't care if you are my daughter. In fact, because you will be held to double the standard. I watched my own face. It was pressed against the gray linoleum, one cheek slightly flattened. My eyes were half open, glazed and vacant, staring at a discarded plastic wrapper under the neighboring table. A thin, watery trickle of saliva had begun to pool at the corner of my mouth. I wanted to tell my mother that her threat was empty now. She couldn't suspend a corpse. She couldn't strip a dead girl of her housing or her dignity. 1. My mother counted. President Vance stepped closer, his brow furrowing as his eyes adjusted to the contrast of the bright red blood smeared across my white cotton shirt. Dean. Mercer. Helen. She's very pale. Even for someone who is faking, that skin tone is unusual. She's always had a flair for the dramatic, Arthur. My mother replied, her tone softening slightly to address her superior, though the underlying steel remained. When she was 7, she threw herself down the stairs because I wouldn't let her have a second cup of juice. She knows exactly how to manipulate a room. She's trying to embarrass me because I didn't let her keep her private room in the dorms this semester. 2. Stacy stood up, brushing off her trousers with a theatrical sigh. If she's going to keep lying there, we're losing time. The blood from the ruptured bag is going to dry and stain the court floor. The athletic director will be furious. She reached down, grabbing my limp left arm, the one she hadn't turned into a pincushion yet. Come on, Zoe. The president is here. Stop being a baby. Stacy yanked. My physical arm rose, loose and heavy like a wet roll of carpet, then fell back. With a wet, heavy thud, my head lolled to the side, my chin pointing toward the ceiling. The angle revealed the dark, purple-black bruising already forming around my collarbone from where I had hit the edge of the metal chair on my way down. Stacy froze. Her fingers were still wrapped around my wrist. The sneer on her face didn't disappear immediately. It curdled, turning into something confused and slightly greasy. She's really cold, Stacy whispered, her voice losing its performative victimhood. And her skin feels soapy. What did you say? President Vance asked, his voice dropping an octave. She's cold, Stacy repeated, louder this time, her eyes darting to my mother. Dean Mercer, her wrist. I can't find. She let go of my hand as if it had burned her. My arm dropped back to the floor, the fingers curling slightly, resting in the edge of the spilled blood. Don't be absurd, my mother said, though for the first time, a small hairline fracture appeared in her composure. She stepped forward, her high heels clicking sharply against the tile, clack, clack, clack. She stopped right beside my head. Zoe. Enough. She reached down, her manicured hand, the one wearing the heavy gold signet ring she had inherited from her father, the university's founder, grabbing my shoulder. She gave me a sharp, impatient shake. My head wobbled. A small bubble of dark, unoxygenated blood popped at my nostril. Zoe, my mother said. Her voice was different now. The dean had slipped away, replaced by something thin and tight. Zoe, stop this. Get up. She shook me again, harder this time. My body simply slid across the slick linoleum, leaving a smear of red behind it like a slug's trail. She's not breathing, Maya called out, pushing her way past the velvet ropes that kept the students in line. The volunteer staff tried to hold her back, but she shoved them aside with a sudden, desperate strength. She dropped to her knees right in the puddle of blood, not caring about her jeans, and pressed her index and middle fingers against my carotid artery. The silence in the gymnasium became absolute. Even the low hum of the refrigeration unit on the blood storage boxes seemed to die away. Maya kept her fingers there for 5 seconds. 10. 12. She looked up, her face completely white, her eyes wide with a horror that was entirely real. She didn't look at the president, and she didn't look at Stacy. She looked directly at my mother. She's dead, Maya whispered. There's no pulse. She's gone. My mother's first instinct was not grief. It was defense. That's impossible, she said, her voice rising to a pitch I had never heard before, a sharp, rattling sound like wine through dry leaves. She was just talking. She was complaining about the needle. She was being difficult. Helen, President Vance said, his hand reaching out to touch her elbow. We need to call 911. Immediately. No, wait, Stacy stammered, backing away toward the supply carts, her hands trembling so hard she knocked over a tray of sterile alcohol wipes. I followed. Protocol. I did. She said she was fine. She signed the waiver. She didn't say she was anemic. She didn't put it on her form. She did. Maya screamed, her hands now covered in my blood as she began chest compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. The sound of my ribs creaking under her palms was a wet, sickening crack. She told you 3 times. I heard her. Everyone in this line heard her. She's lying, Stacy shrieked, her face twisting into a mask of pure panic. She's a student. She's trying to protect her friend. Dean Mercer, you saw her. You told me to keep drawing. You said she had to finish. I said no such thing, my mother said instantly. The speed of her denial was breathtaking. I hovered above them, watching her eyes dart around the room, calculating, measuring, rebuilding her fortress in real time. I told her to participate, my mother said, her voice steadying as the institutional machinery of her brain took over. I did not authorize medical malpractice. If this nurse was negligent, if she failed to screen my daughter properly, then that is a matter for the health department and the agency. The university has strict guidelines. Helen, stop, President Vance said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. Looked around the gymnasium. There were 40 students in line. Some of them had their phones out. Some of them were already recording. Put those phones away, he roared at the crowd. Delete those videos. This is an active medical emergency. Anyone recording will face immediate suspension. But it was too late. The light from dozens of small screens flickered in the dim corners of the bleachers. The digital world had already taken its first bite of the scene. Maya was still pumping. 15, 16, 17. Come on, Zoe, she sobbed, her breath rattling in her chest. Come on, please. Don't do this. Don't let them do this to you. She leaned down, pinched my nose and blew into my mouth. I watched from above. As my chest rose slightly, a false breath of life pumped into a broken vessel, only to sink back down with a hollow sigh. When Maya pulled back, her lips were stained with my blood. The campus police arrived first. 3 minutes later, their heavy boots squeaked on the floor. Then came the paramedics, their red bags slamming onto the tile as they pushed Maya out of the way. How long has she been down? The lead paramedic, a thick-set man with a gray mustache, asked as he ripped open my shirt to apply the defibrillator pads. Just a minute, Stacy lied. Maybe 2. It's been at least 10, Maya yelled. She was being pushed back by a campus officer. They were arguing with her while she was unconscious. They kicked her. The dean kicked her. The paramedic looked up, his eyes locking onto my mother for a fraction of a second, then back to the monitor. He switched on the machine. Beep. A flat, unbroken line stretched across the small screen. Charging, the paramedic said. Clear. They shocked me. My body gave a sudden, violent jump, my spine arching off the floor like a fish caught on a hook. My arms flailed slightly, the bruised inner elbows flashing purple under the high-intensity lights. Beep. Nothing. Charging again. Clear. Another shock. Another jump. I looked at my mother. She was standing 6 feet away, her arms crossed again. But this time she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the floor near her. Shoes. There was a small spot of blood on the toe of her left pump, the shoe she had used to press down on my wrist. She took a step back, trying to hide the shoe behind her other ankle, but her movement was clumsy. We're not getting anything, the second paramedic said, looking at his partner. She's totally dry. Look at her veins, they're collapsed. How much blood did they take? She only hit the 100 milliliter mark, Stacy whimpered, her voice cracking. I swear. The bag on the floor was the only one. The paramedic looked at the shattered bag on the floor, then at the 2 empty bags sitting on Stacy's cart, the ones she had already swapped out while I was losing consciousness. He didn't say anything, but his expression went cold. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small plastic seal, labeling the cart as a biohazard site. We're calling it, the lead paramedic said quietly. He stopped the machine. The flatline stayed. Time of death, 2:14 p.m. The silence returned, but this time it was different. It wasn't the silence of anticipation. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a room that had just become a crime scene. They covered my body with a yellow sheet. It was a strange choice of color, too bright like a raincoat. I watched them lift me onto a gurney and wheel me out through the back exit of the gymnasium, away from the crowd of students who had been pushed back into the lobby. My mother didn't follow the gurney. She went straight to her office on the 3rd floor of the administration building. I floated along behind her, a silent, weightless shadow. Her heels didn't click anymore. She walked quickly, almost silently, her head down, her phone pressed to her ear. Arthur, she was saying into the receiver, her voice low and frantic. We need to secure the intake logs from the health center. Zoe's medical records, they need to be sealed. If the press gets hold of her history, they'll spin this into some kind of domestic dispute. She paused, listening to President Vance's response. No, you don't understand, she hissed, locking her office door behind her and throwing her purse onto the leather sofa. She had a condition. She was diagnosed at 12, but she hasn't had an episode in years. She didn't have a medical exemption on file with the registrar. If she didn't file the paperwork, the university isn't liable for her participation in a voluntary event. She was pacing now, her fingers digging into the fabric of her skirt. Stacy is an agency nurse. She's not our employee. We can distance ourselves from her. But we have to make sure the student who was screaming, the pre-med girl, is handled. She's spreading rumors about me kicking Zoe. It was a nudge, Arthur. I was trying to wake her up. It was a standard physical stimulus to check for responsiveness. She stopped pacing and stood in front of the window, looking out over the quad. Down below, 3 police cruisers were parked with their lights flashing, casting long, blue and red reflections across the stone arches of the library. I did what I had to do for this institution, my mother whispered, her voice cracking slightly, though her face in the glass reflection remained hard. She was my daughter. Do you think I wanted this? But she was always so fragile, so difficult. She never understood the pressure I was under. She hung up the phone and threw it onto her desk. Then she sat down in her high-backed leather chair, the one that made her look so small yet so powerful. She buried her face in her hands. For a moment, I thought she was going to cry. I drifted closer, hovering just inches above her head, waiting for the first tear, the first sign of the mother who used to massage my cold feet when the anemia made them numb, the mother who had stayed up for 48 hours straight when I had the flu at age 10. But when she pulled her hands away, her eyes were dry. She opened her bottom desk drawer and pulled out a small, leather-bound journal. It was my diary. I had left it in her apartment over the summer, and she had never returned it. She flipped through the pages until she found the entry from my freshman year, the day she had taken away my merit scholarship. Mom told me today that I have to give up the scholarship I had written in my looping, untidy script. She said if the daughter of the dean gets the top award, the board will think it's nepotism. She said I have to be her sacrifice, so everyone knows she's honest. I cried, but I told her I understood. I love her so much. I just want her to be proud of me. My mother's thumb lingered on the words, I just want her to be proud of me. For a second, her lip trembled. A tiny, silver tear finally formed in the corner of her eye. But then, she heard a knock on the door. Dean Mercer, a voice called out. It was her administrative assistant, Sarah. The police department is here. They have some questions about the incident. And there are reporters from the local news station in the lobby. My mother closed the diary. She didn't put it back in the drawer. She walked over to the small paper shredder in the corner of her office, turned it on, and fed the pages into the whirring metal teeth. One by one, my words, my love, my obedience, my silent suffering, were turned into thin gray ribbons of trash. Tell them I'll be right down, Sarah, my mother said, her voice completely steady now. And call the university legal counsel. Tell them we need a non-disclosure agreement drafted for the student volunteer, Maya Chun, immediately. The world did not wait for my mother's legal counsel. By 5 p.m., the first video had been uploaded to TikTok. It wasn't a high-quality recording, just 15 seconds of shaky footage taken from behind a row of lockers, but it was enough. The video showed me lying on the floor, my white shirt soaked in red. It showed Stacy shoving my shoulder and ripping the needle out, then stabbing it back into my arm while I lay motionless. It captured her voice, clear and sharp over the quiet, Jim. Oops, missed the vein. You won't mind, right? And then it showed my mother. It captured her stepping forward, her face cold and distant and her foot coming down. The angle was clear. It didn't look like a physical stimulus. It looked like a kick. It showed my body sliding off the chair, my head hitting the floor, with a hollow sound, and my mother pressing her shoe onto my wrist. The caption of the video was simple. Dean Mercer's daughter dies after being forced to donate blood. They told her she was faking. Within 3 hours, the video had 5 million views. By midnight, it was 20 million. The comments were a rising tide of fury. Is this a university or a torture chamber? The nurse literally stabbed her multiple times while she was unconscious. That's murder. Look at the mother's face. She didn't even flinch when her daughter hit the ground. Who is this? Dean? She needs to be in jail. I spent the night drifting through the campus. It was a strange, hollow experience. The students in the dorms weren't sleeping. In my old building, girls were gathered in the common room, watching the video on repeat, their faces illuminated by the blue light of their phones. I always thought Zoe was just quiet. One of my classmates, a girl named Chloe, said her eyes red. She always wore long sleeves, even in the summer. I thought she was just self-conscious. But she was sick. She was really sick and her mom made her do this. Did you see what Stacy did? Another girl asked, her voice shaking. She triaged herself. She lied about the blood bags. Someone said the police found 3 empty bags in her trash can, not just one. She drew 1,200 milliliters from her before she died. They were right. Stacy had been trying to hit a quota. The agency she worked for paid a bonus for every station that reached 150% of its target. She had seen my mother's Indifference as a green light to use me as a human tap. In the campus health center, the lights were still on. I found Stacy sitting in a small examination room, guarded by 2 police officers. She was no longer crying. She was hyperventilating, her hands tucked under her armpits to keep them from shaking. I was just doing what the dean told me, she kept repeating to the detective, sitting across from her. The dean said she was a drama queen. She said, "You stay in that chair until you hit 400, Zoe, even if it kills you." Those were her exact words. She said it in front of 30 people. Why am I the only one being questioned? "We have the video, Stacy," the detective, a tired-looking man named Miller, said. He slid his phone across the desk, showing her the clip of her stabbing my arm. "That's not medical care. That's assault." She was resisting. Stacy screamed. She was trying to ruin the drive. Through the blood. "The medical examiner's preliminary report says otherwise," Miller said quietly. "Zoe Mercer had a blood volume of less than 3 liters due to her chronic condition. You drew nearly half of it in less than 20 minutes. She didn't throw the blood, Stacy." Her heart stopped, her body went into hypovolemic shock. "And she fell. The bag burst because you dropped it when you panicked." Stacy stared at him, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "And your toxicology report?" Miller continued. "We found traces of amphetamines in your system. You've been working 36-hour shifts, haven't you? You were high on pep pills while you were holding that needle." Stacy collapsed backward against the chair, her face turning a muddy shade of gray. I felt a strange, cold pity for her. She was a monster, yes, but she was a monster my mother had cultivated. She had seen my mother's cruelty and recognized it as permission to be cruel herself. 3 days later, the university held an emergency press conference in the main auditorium. I sat in the front row, or rather, I hovered above it, my translucent legs dangling over the velvet cushions. The room was packed with reporters there, cameras flashing like a wall of lightning. My mother sat at the center of the long mahogany table, flanked by President Vance and 3 high-priced defense attorneys from the university's firm. She was dressed in a dark gray suit, her hair pulled back into a tight, flawless boon. She looked pale, but her chin was held high. "Thank you all for coming," President Vance began, his voice heavy with institutional grief. "The entire community of Southern State University is mourning the tragic loss of Zoe Mercer. Zoe was a bright light on our campus, a dedicated student, and a beloved daughter." He paused, looking down at his notes. "We want to clarify that the blood drive was organized by an independent, third-party agency, Apex Health Services. The university had no role in the hiring or training of the medical staff on site. We are cooperating fully with the police department and the state medical board to ensure that those responsible for this tragedy are held accountable." "Dean Mercer," a reporter from the New York Times called out, standing up before Vance could even finish his statement. "The video circulating online shows you kicking your daughter after she collapsed. Can you explain your actions?" My mother leaned forward, touching the microphone with her fingertips. Her hand was steady. "The video," she said, her voice dropping into a low, mournful register that sounded almost authentic, "is a devastating distortion of a mother's worst nightmare. When Zoe collapsed, I believed she was having a seizure or a syncopal episode. My training as a first responder, which I received during my time as a youth counselor, instructs us to apply a painful stimulus to the extremity to check for consciousness." She looked directly into the camera lens, her eyes glistening. My kick was a desperate attempt to nudge her foot to see if she would react. My hand on her wrist was an attempt to find her pulse. I was terrified. I was in shock. To see my actions twisted into an accusation of abuse. It is a pain that no mother should ever have to bear. A murmur ran through the room. Some of the older reporters looked sympathetic. It was a good story, a mother's frantic, clumsy attempt to save her child, misinterpreted by a mob of teenagers with cell phones. "But what about her anemia, Dean Mercer?" another reporter asked. "The student, Maya-chan, says Zoe told you she was too sick to donate. Why did you insist she participate?" My mother's face hardened, just for a fraction of a second, before settling back into grief. "Zoe never informed me that her anemia had returned," she said smoothly. "She had been in remission for years. She was a young woman of 19. She kept her medical decisions private. If she had told me she was feeling unwell, I would have been the first to pull her out of that room. My daughter's health was always my highest priority." "That is a lie," a voice rang out from the back of the auditorium. The cameras turned. Maya-chan was standing in the doorway. She wasn't wearing her student uniform. She was wearing a simple black dress, and she was holding a thick, manila envelope. "Maya, President Vance said, his voice tightening. This is a closed press conference. Please step outside. No, Maya said. She walked down the center aisle, her boots echoing in the sudden silence. You told me you would suspend me if I spoke to the press. You offered me a full scholarship for the rest of my degree if I signed a non-disclosure agreement. But I don't care about your scholarship. And I don't care about your threats. She reached the front of the stage and threw the envelope onto the mahogany table, right in front of my mother. The envelope burst open, and dozens of sheets of paper spilled out. Those are Zoe's medical records from the campus health center, Maya said, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. They were sent to the dean's office 3 weeks ago. There's a signature on the receipt. It's yours, Helen. My mother didn't look at the papers. She didn't move. And this, Maya said, pulling her phone out and plugging it into the auditorium's media projector. This is a recording from my phone. I didn't take video. I took audio. I started recording when Zoe first went into the gym, because I knew how you treated her. I wanted to have proof for the housing board. She pressed play. My voice came through the high-fidelity speakers of the auditorium, thin and trembling but unmistakable. Mom, please. My iron levels were at 8.2 last week. Dr. Evans said if I lose any blood, I could go into heart failure. And then my mother's voice, cold, sharp, and clear as glass. I don't care about Dr. Evans, Zoe. I care about this university. If you don't sit in that chair, you can pack your bags and leave my house. You're going to do this, and you're going to do it now. The recording continued. The sound of Stacy's laughter. The sound of the needle sliding into my flesh. The sound of my final, gasping breaths. And then, my mother's final words before I fell. You stay in that chair until you hit 400, Zoe, even if it kills you. The auditorium went dead silent. The reporters didn't even yell. They just stared at the stage, their faces filled with a collective cold disgust. My mother looked at the projector screen, then at the papers on the table, and, finally, she looked up at the ceiling, right where I was floating. For the first time, her face didn't have a plan. The fortress had crumbled. There were no more words to shred, no more students to silence, no more optics to protect. She was just a woman who had killed her own daughter for a photo opportunity. The fallout was swift and absolute. By the next morning, my mother had been stripped of her title and her credentials. The University Board of Trustees issued a public apology, dissolving the entire administration and launching an independent investigation into the cover-up. President Vance resigned by noon. Stacy was arrested and charged with involuntary manslaughter and reckless endangerment. She was held on a $500,000 bond, her career in medicine over, before it had even truly begun. But my mother wasn't arrested. Not yet. The district attorney was building a larger case, investigating her for civil rights violations, child abuse, and institutional fraud. She was confined to her house, our house, under a temporary house arrest warrant. I followed her back to the quiet, suburban home where I had grown up. It was a beautiful place, filled with white linen furniture and expensive landscape paintings. There were no photos of me on the walls. My mother had always said that family photos in the common areas looked cluttered. She sat on the sofa, the television playing the local news on mute. The screen showed her face next to mine, under the headline, "The Dean of Death. Mother accused in daughter's fatal blood draw." The phone on the kitchen counter was ringing. It had been ringing for 3 days. She had unplugged the main line, but her cell phone on the coffee table continued to buzz, its vibration a low, insect-like hum against the wood. Beep, beep, beep. It was her lawyers. It was her former friends. It was the board. It was the strangers who had found her number online. She didn't answer. She stood up and walked down the hallway to my bedroom. She hadn't been in here since I left for college. The room was exactly as I had left it. A pile of textbooks on the desk. A half-finished knitting project in the corner. My favorite blue sweater hanging over the back of the chair. My mother walked over to the closet and opened it. Hanging inside were dozens of long-sleeved shirts, the ones I wore to hide the bruises from my blood tests, the ones I wore because I was always so cold. She reached out and touched the fabric of a gray cardigan. It still smelled like me, a mixture of lavender soap and the iron-like scent of my vitamins. Suddenly, she fell to her knees. She grabbed the cardigan and pressed it to her face, her shoulders shaking violently. She didn't make a sound at first. It was a dry, choking sob that seemed to tear its way out of her throat. "Zoe," she whispered into the wool. "Zoe, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I floated down, landing softly on the carpet beside her. I reached out my translucent hand and touched her shoulder. I expected to feel anger. I expected to feel the satisfaction of revenge. After all, she had taken my scholarship, my internship, my health, and finally my life. But as my hand passed through her warm, living shoulder, leaving only a faint chill behind, I felt nothing but a deep, heavy sadness. I know, Mom, I whispered, though she couldn't hear me. I know. She had spent her whole life trying to build a perfect world, a world of boundaries, of fairness, of optics. She had sacrificed me to her god of public opinion, believing that if she just gave up enough of her own flesh and blood, she would finally be safe. But the god she worshipped was hollow, and now, she was left alone in the ruins of the temple she had built with my bones. She sat on the floor of my closet for hours, holding my old clothes, until the sun went down and the room was swallowed by the dark. Downstairs, the police were waiting. I saw the blue lights flashing through my bedroom window, casting long, rhythmic shadows across the ceiling. They would be coming for her soon. She would spend the rest of her life in a small, concrete cell, surrounded by the silence she had earned. I stood up, my body feeling lighter now, the coldness of the gymnasium floor finally fading from my memory. I looked at my mother one last time. She was still sitting in the dark, a small, broken figure clutching a gray sweater, weeping for a daughter she had only loved when it was too late. I turned away from her and walked toward the window. The glass didn't stop me. I slipped through it, out into the cool night air, floating up past the trees, past the flashing lights, and into the wide quiet dark of the sky. I was finally free.